Hey, everybody, it's Georgina from RadioHighwayPirates.net. Thank you for listening to The Metal Frequency. Today's topic of discussion is going to be the greatest heavy metal bands of all time. And I am going to start with the greatest heavy metal band of all time being Black Sabbath, right? They're number one on my list. Now, who are Black Sabbath? If you don't know who they are, then I don't know where you've been. They're an English rock band. They were formed in Birmingham, England, back in the late 60s by Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler, Bill Ward, and Ozzy Osbourne as well. Black Sabbath are pretty much cited as the pioneers of heavy metal music, and we all love them. Next on my list would be Iron Maiden. Now, they're no stranger to the scene. They've been here and with us since the 80s, and they've produced a very long list of great albums. As far as live, Bruce is the man. I've seen Iron Maiden on many occasions, and they never disappoint, and Bruce is phenomenal. I even have a lot of his solo stuff, and I love Iron Maiden, and I'm pretty sure you do too. Next on my list would be Metallica. They're a little bit more commercialized now than they were back when. They're an American heavy metal band, and I believe they were formed back in the 80s in LA by Lars and James Hetfield. And they've been based in San Francisco for the majority of their career, and they're just known for being Metallica. Next on my list would be Judas Priest. We all know and love Judas Priest. And they hail from England. And the metal band formed back in the late 60s. Can you believe that? And they've sold millions and millions of albums to date. And they're frequently ranked in the top metal list. So they don't need any introduction. So it's a no-brainer that they even were as the on this list, at least. Next would be Motorhead. And I love Lemmy. And he's been like the sole constant member since The Obvious, along with Larry Wallace and drummer Lucas Fox, and they've been considered the precursor of the new wave of British heavy metal. And Motorhead, we all just know and love Motorhead, so this is also no stranger that they would be on this, at least my top. Next would be Megadeth. I love Dave Mustaine. I just love him. I think he's great. He's a great role model too. And they're an American heavy metal band from LA. And Dave Mustaine and Dave Ellefson formed the band back in the early 80s. And they've been a pioneer of American thrash metal for the longest time. And they're a part of the Big Four as well. Next on my list would be Slayer. And they're also from the Americas, and they're from California, from Huntington Park, and they were formed back in the 80s, early 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And they were founded by the guitarist, Jeff Hanneman, and Kerry King as well. And these guys rose to fame back in the mid-80s with Reign of Blood, and they have not skipped a beat. Next on my list, I'm a big Pantera fan. I love Down as well. And they're from Arlington, Texas. And these guys formed back in the early 80s. And they released, I think, 4 albums back in the 80s when the metal scene was just like really amazing. And they were looking for like this heavier sound. And they had introduced singer Phil Anselmo back in the mid 80s. And it never disappointed. I love every single Pantera album there is. Next, we have Ozzy as himself, right? And he's the pioneer, one of the pioneers of heavy metal, and he's probably one of the most commercially successful and iconic people in this genre. He was born in England, in Birmingham, and his real name is John Michael Osborne. And after leaving school, he had like all these different jobs, and then he ended up in a band with Geezer, and the rest is history, right? We all know. Next on my list would be Ronnie James Dio. And do I really need to say any more, right? He was born in 1942, and he's from New York. and he began his recording career back in 1958. So that's all I need to say. If you don't know, you should know. Next on my list would be Deep Purple. And again, these guys need no introduction. And they were known as one of the, forerunners of heavy metal. And we'll leave it at that. So it's a no-brainer for them to kind of at least make my list. Next on my list would be Scorpions. I love the Scorpions. And everything about them. They're not as heavy as the majority or commercialized, but everybody knows the Scorpions. And if you don't, run out there and grab one of their CDs. I love Slipknot, guys. They made the list. I absolutely love Slipknot. I'm a huge Slipknot fan. They hail from the Americas, and they're from Des Moines, Iowa. And they got together back in the mid-'90s, and they were founded by Sean Crahan and Paul Gray, the bassist. And they made a lot of changes in their early days, and the band originally consisted of like 9 people. But they're no stranger to the game. I love Slipknot. I really do. And I'm pretty sure you do as well. Next on my list is Anthrax. I love Anthrax. They hail from my city, New York City, and they formed back in 1981 with Scott Ian and Dan Lilker. Sorry, I got tongue-tied, guys. And these guys were considered, and are still considered, one of the leaders of thrash metal scene. They were huge in the 80s, and they are a part of the Big Four. And there's, as you can see, of course, they're going to make this list or any list. Next on my list is Rainbow. I love Rainbow, and this British rock band was led by Ritchie Blackmore. And they were active from 1975 to 1984, and then I believe the early 90s into the late 90s, and then 2015 until today. So they've been kind of on and off, but their name was inspired by the Rainbow Bar and Grill in Hollywood. And obviously these guys are staples to the scene, and everybody knows Rainbow. I even tossed in Alice Cooper. I kind of added him because he's pretty relative as well. And interesting story is he was the son of a minister. And at a young age, he moved to Phoenix, Arizona. And at 17, he formed a rock band called the Earwigs. And he's just been in the scene forever. And still is. And we all love Alice. Next on my list would be Motley Crue. And I know a lot of people are kind of, Motley Crue. But yeah, Motley Crue. They're a hard rock band, right, versus like heavy metal, but still relative and stuff. I threw them on my list. They were founded by Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee. And they have sold millions and millions and millions of records. And they've been on tour for the longest time, and everybody loves Motley Crue. Next on my list would probably be Queensryche, and they hail from the Americas, and they were formed back in the 80s, and they've released so many studio albums, and they continue to tour, and I love Queensryche. I love them. Next on my list would be Testament. And I love Testament, and I'm going to keep it short. I just love Testament. There are many reasons why, and there are too many to list. I'm also going to add here on my list, I'm going to throw in Dream Theater. I like Dream Theater. A lot of people don't like this progressive band from New York City. They think that their songs are like, too long and too complicated. I remember when these guys formed in 1985, John Petrucci and their drummer Mike Portnoy and John Myung. And they are Berklee college graduates of music, and they're no stranger to the scene. And I personally like Dream Theater. I'll even throw in Helloween. Now, these guys are a German power metal band, and they formed back in the 80s in Germany. And they've put out so much stuff, and I just love Helloween. I'm going to put in Also, Exodus. And I really like the band Exodus, and you should too. I've even thrown in Faith No More because everybody knows I love Faith No More. I am like one of the hugest Faith No More fans there ever was. And these guys are more unorthodox in the metal scene. And they have like a mix of traditional heavy metal and a myriad of other music genres that they mash up. They formed back in San Francisco back in 1981, and I'm the biggest Mike Patton fan there ever was. I love everything, his solo stuff, his stage antics, and just him as a person. He just seems like the coolest person. But I love Faith No More, and there's no doubt that I would kind of toss them into my list. I'll put in Overkill. As they're pretty relative in the scene. These guys are from Jersey, and I'll leave it at that. I like Overkill. I'm going to put in, trying to think what other band. I guess I would put Venom in there as well. I like Venom, and they're no strangers to the scene. They've been around since God only knows, and they've kind of established their name in the scene. I like Mastodon as well. I'd put them in the list. And these guys hail from Atlanta, Georgia. And in the late 90s, they kind of came out with a lot of cool stuff. And if you haven't listened to anything from Mastodon, it's time. It's time that you do. And to conclude this kind of short episode, I've included some of the most iconic names in music. And as you guys can see, from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s and well into the millennium, right? Heavy metal music has been alive, it's well, and as you and I both know, it's here to stay. And it's been established as one of the most popular music genres out there, and it will continue to do so. Anyway, thank you for listening. Have yourselves a great day. Keep it heavy. Bye.